You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph. It is Halloween, Tuesday, October 31st. I'm sure some of you are out with your kiddos right now. You'll catch the rewatch. But just hours ago, earlier today, the NFL trade deadline came and went, and the 49ers came and saw and conquered with another big swing acquisition before the deadline. Joining me to talk about the trade and what it means for the 49ers going forward is Weston. How you doing today, Weston?
Happy Halloween, Steph. It was an uneventful day until this dropped. I shouldn't say that if my kids are listening. It was a lot of fun doing their Halloween parades and the trick-or-treating and all that fun stuff. It was a nice distraction, but pretty awesome to get some news while you're walking around with other adults who are checking their phone at the same time, like, dude, you see what your team did, dude? You know, and I'm like, let's go.
This is awesome because on a Tuesday, normally we do these shows on Monday. I'm glad, actually, in hindsight, that we're doing it today on a Tuesday and we get to talk about this. We don't have to talk about the fact that the 49ers just lost their third game in a row. We're not going to do that. I was literally just talking about that before we went live here. And, I'm seeing people excited in the comments, and I'm like, this is great. That is what it's all about. The trade deadline and the 49ers trading for Commanders defensive end Chase Young. So, of course, 49ers get Chase Young and the Commanders get a 2024 compensatory third-round pick. Of course, that is one of the picks they got for all the hires they got or the coaches that were hired away, Rand Carthon, Saleh, all those guys, D'Amico. So, I mean, really, in hindsight, it kind of didn't even cost the 49ers anything. Like, if you want to get real technical, because the 49ers still have their own third round pick, and they have another one that we can assume they'll be getting from Mike McGlinchey, departing this offseason. So, man, Weston, thoughts?
A lot. If we want to go a step further, if this is going to become a rental for the remainder of the year, there's every bit of opportunity that they'll get the compensatory pick back in 2025, right? Exactly. So it's just an even swap. Look, lot to be excited about. Let's call it what it is. I mean, Chase Young is still 24 years young, right? He's still got a lot of football ahead of him. Obviously, there was a lot of excitement, coming out of Ohio State, the number 2 overall pick. He's had some bright moments. He's had some injury history behind him, but I know other fans like I were probably clamoring a little bit more in the help department from maybe some other positions outside of what, we technically view as a strength on paper for this particular team. But there's one rule in football that you should always live by. You can never have enough pass rush, period, point blank. Like, there's no other way to describe it. So I'm excited. I'm just, when the Montez Sweat was going to Chicago, you're like, that was a target that felt like expendable. And then you're like, here we go. It's going to be another trade deadline and, nothing's going to happen. And then you see this splash. So in a 3-week mill of just like really bad news, just time and time again, nice to get something a little bit excited about heading into the trade. Into the bye week.
Yeah.
Where you feel like, okay, that actually gives Chase enough time to get over here, get settled, get a little bit acclimated, and find the field for week 10 against the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, I love it. I love the timing of it. And you mentioned how young he is, 24 and a half years old. You mentioned Montez Sweat. Sweat is 27 years old. So a couple years older than Chase Young, and he went for a second-round pick to the Bears, right? And for the Bears, I'm like, okay, that's kind of confusing because you guys are like not good. So in reality, it's like a very early second-round pick, essentially a late first for the Bears that they gave up basically for Montez Sweat. And so you look then an hour later or so, John Lynch making this move, and it looks a hell of a lot better because the Commanders also fronting most of the bill. The 49ers are just on the hook for $561,000 this season. So it being a rental, it costing that much, I would say that's worth it, right? Like just a third round pick that you are likely going to get back. Like I said, if he signs a deal elsewhere after this season. So I like it. And if you're going all in, you're not necessarily mortgaging the future for this move. And I think it's going to help the team a lot. John Lynch playing chess, not checkers. I got to give him props after this one. It especially like just after the Sweat like trade, it just looked a hell of a lot better within an hour. Like that's impressive. And the same team, the Commanders traded both of these guys. So I think that makes it all the more impressive. You did mention his injury history, Weston, and I do want to talk about that because look, for me, before this trade happened, I was like, out of Montez Sweat and Chase Young, I think I would do Montez Sweat just because like he doesn't have the injury attachments to him and all of that. That being said, looking at the compensation, everything we just talked about, looking at the compensation, looking at how low risk it is, I think it's a great move, even despite his injury history. I mean, and I'm showing it here for the YouTube viewers. So for the audio ones, what we're looking at, Chase Young's injury history in 2020, he had a groin strain, grade 2. He was sidelined for just one game there. The big one is the ACL tear, which happened in 2021. And so, of course, that kept him out for a year. A lot of people are like, it takes 2 years for guys to really get over an ACL and feel like their old selves. And so we're at that 2-year point now for Chase Young. So in that sense, it was kind of surprising actually that the Commanders, felt that they would move on from him. The only other injury that he had after the ACL was a neck injury, which kept him out the first game of the season. He came back in week 2. So really not that bad if you look at it. It's really just the ACL. Like the 49ers have dealt with guys that have had ACL injuries before. And now these days with the way that, rehab goes, with the way that, I don't know, the medical field is advancing and all that, ACL tears are not quite as bad as they used to be. So I feel good about this move and it helping the 49ers this year. And if they want, I really don't think they'll have Chase Young beyond this year, but if they really want, like, I'm sure they could pull some strings and make it happen.
I think it's going to be dependent upon his play for the remainder of the season, right? It's contract year, that that fifth year option to get picked up. So a lot is going to be predicated on the total body of work in this final season to find out if that's feasible or not. But you hit a lot of good points there, Steph, about compensation for the Redskins, total compensation on what they owe. Commanders. My God. Apologies, but
don't get me canceled here.
I know, but they will forever be that for me because that's how long it goes back. But I respectfully apologize for that Freudian slip. But even the compensation that the 49ers are going to provide, what does that all spell? And you talk about the injury history. I know we were all enamored with this trade, and we're like, we want him to make this impact like right away, and we want him to be an every down player because that's what he was in Washington. But does he have to be that now? Can he be situational? Can he be a depth piece? Can he be, let him play into the role over the first 2, 3, 4 weeks that he's on this team, as long as the team is progressing in the right direction? Because there's nothing that you gave up that warrants you need to be 85+% of the defensive snaps. And that's hard to, unless your name is Nick Bosa, you don't get that percentage of snaps along this defensive line because of how they rotate and how they do those things. So to me, this is no harm, no foul, no matter what. Ton of plus side. The risk is minimal, very, very minimal. You know what the risk is, Steph? It's disappointment. Like if it doesn't, like if nothing comes to fruition
And
as
we're
a
okay with
fan,
that
you're
at
just
this point.
disappointed.
We're
That's
used
it.
to
Yeah, I
that.
mean, that's going on 21 straight days of disappointment around this team. So I you mentioned John Lynch before, right? To me, this is what every sports fan wants of their general manager. Somebody who just shows that they are aggressive and recognizing the scenario. Like, listen, at the end of the day, going to sign Chase Young could just be a splash move to make a splash move, right? It could have no impact on this team. Cool.
Yeah.
But that's my general manager recognizing that, like, this is where we are. We need to make some corrections. We haven't seen a pass rush, and we're still serious about this thing, i.e., hoisting the Lombardi trophy at the end of this. Let me go make a play. And I learned everything that I need to know once this trade happened. NFL fans across the country, through work, through friends, etc., who all root for different teams, all text messaging me with the same theme. You guys are so annoying. Like, we need pass rush help. You guys are, John Lynch is so annoying and You know what? Like, that's how we've been feeling about the Philadelphia Eagles, right? Like, and Howie Roseman, like, God, that guy's annoying. You have an embarrassment of riches. I want people talking about my general manager that way. That means we're here to win. We're here to play. This is serious. They don't want to lose the season. And this is the move that they made to kind of signify that.
Yeah, I think so. And there were reports, Tim K from The Athletic did report shortly after the Chase Young acquisition that the 49ers weren't done, or like they were closing in on another trade. It seems like that didn't happen. So, a lot of people were giving him flack for that, but that happens. Like sometimes you get close to something and it just doesn't happen. So, I have to wonder if they were also looking at Jalen Johnson, which, shortly after Tim K did tweet that, Jalen Johnson, or we saw reports that Jalen Johnson would stay with the Bears. Again, Bears, very confusing team. I don't know what they're doing. But the other, Rasul Douglas, was also traded to the Bills. He's a DB from Buffalo. So who knows? Maybe the 49ers were in on him too. Like, I don't know. But I do find some comfort despite, them not getting the corner. I do find comfort in knowing that John Lynch wanted to address that as well. I mean, he's going all in for this season. I think
100%.
this move in itself like tells you as much, right? So let's talk about like the impact of how this could help Sir Nicholas Bosa, because now you got two Buckeyes reunited on the defensive line, and this is insane. This is like, you're talking about an embarrassment of riches, Weston. Like the amount of first-round picks that this defensive line now has is insane. They're collecting infinity stones of first-round picks at this point. Bosa and Young were each second overall picks in their respective drafts. And, when they were both at Ohio State, the only time they really overlapped on the field was in 2018. And before Nick Bosa had his abdominal injury, they shared the field together for 3 games. They combined in those 3 games for 16 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 6 sacks. So, I mean, you can see the vision that Ohio State had, and that vision is going to, kind of show itself on this 49ers defensive line now with both of them reunited.
There's always a lot to be said for camaraderie, familiarity, right? You're seeing it in our most recent opponent with Burrow and Chase, who had that rapport, and then coming into the league, and not saying that bookend ends are going to have that same type of impact or that same type of rapport. But yeah, these guys, they loom large for each other, especially once Bosa moved on, right, and becomes the number 2 overall pick. That was the talk of the town for Chase Young, was to try to become the number 1 overall pick. So there's like a competitive slate there, because they were literally the number 2 overall picks in consecutive drafts, right? Like, so And we didn't get to see more of it because Nick spent majority of that senior his last year with what was the core injury, right? That he actually had that kept him out.
Yep.
I just think there's a lot to be excited about. I know you mentioned and maybe this is the last time we bring it up about like the 49ers. I'm not shooting Tim K because I know because they made this move, I know the 49ers were in the mix on corners. I know John Lynch was doing that. And I'm sure, like he was trying to have another steal and another win and got cute. I kind of had this feeling that like Jalen Johnson was off the market when they landed Montez Sweat because it's like, well, why would you pay big, give up things for this guy, bring him in, and you're going to get rid of another budding superstar just because you don't want to pay him? Like, you're going to have the space, you're going to have the things like, you're still a team trying to figure it out. Quarterback on a rookie contract, like you'll still figure things out. So it kind of felt like he was going to come off the market anyway. And then the Rasul Douglas, and then you saw the Adoree Jackson reports. Like, I'm not going to lie to you, I don't want Adoree Jackson anywhere near this football team. So I'm fine with that not working out.
I will add, I think a lot of us were duped, including myself. That was a parody page.
I didn't. I just saw it and I saw a bunch of retweets and I'm like, thank God
exactly.
that didn't work
I saw
out.
the same thing. I looked at it. He had a check mark. It looked legit. Props to him. He runs a tight ship there with his parody page, making it look pretty legit. And a lot of us fell for it, but that is not true. But I do think that despite maybe that not being true, 49ers definitely were looking to bring in a corner. But it's all right. The 49ers do have Samuel Womack and Darrell Luter coming back from IR here pretty soon. So if they do feel like they need to make a change, they have options internally to explore. Now, that being said, Weston, much has been said about Steve Wilks lately, and these rifts with Kyle Shanahan and his players and all that's going on there. It's kind of a bold move in a sense for John Lynch to say, "Hey, you have all these weapons, all right, and you're underperforming with these weapons, but I'm gonna go ahead and get you one more, all right? But after this, you don't have any excuses. None. Zero." So what are your thoughts on that, Weston? Like, he really does have no excuses. So I'm sure this bye week is an opportunity for Wilks to kind of, recalibrate everything, see what's going on, what needs to be adjusted, get his new guy, Chase Young, in there and get him used to the rest of the guys in the group. The defensive line, Chris Kosarick, of course, will be part of that as well. But there's a lot of work to do in this bye week, and it's not just about acclimating Chase Young to your defense, right? So how do you think this defense looks moving forward with this acquisition? Is it enough for you to move the needle?
No. And the reason why I say it's not enough to move the needle is like, listen, Chase Young is a fine football player, right? And I'm happy with the addition. But I think Steve Wilks' seat was already getting hot. And honestly, this acquisition probably makes the seat hotter in the sense of like, now you need to produce. Now you got 10 days. Get this kid. This is like your priority. Get this kid acclimated. Get these players on the same page and let's go. Because you know what the truth is? The truth is he had all pros at every single level before you brought Chase Young to this football team. And we've seen this defense take significant steps back throughout this entire year so far. The last 3 weeks have been really glaring. You and I have talked about how it's actually been going on all season. The offense has just had an opportunity to mask it. And I'm buying into the heat around him. When Kyle is outwardly speaking about, we know when Kyle is outwardly speaking about something, the issue's already there. Now it's magnified, right? Because he's not normally that guy. And we know what it means when you land in his doghouse. You see the frustration on the players and not understanding like why the tweaks to the scheme that has been so successful are taking place. And here's what stands out for me, Steph, is I know we haven't talked about the game yet, but just last week's game against the Cincinnati Bengals, the team was credited for 13 missed tackles. That is a significant number in a single football game from a team who is usually one of the shortest tackling teams in the NFL. And I'm pretty confident that like Fred Warner did not forget how to tackle. Dre Greenlaw didn't forget how to tackle, right? Like they didn't just forget how to do that over a football season. The truth is I am now firmly believing that because of the scheme, because of the changes, there is a slight dip in confidence and understanding of the scheme, and that is causing them to be a quarter to a half a step slower, which is why you're missing tackles, because now your arms are in the play, not your body, like the way that it used to be. And I think that's just a huge contribution to it. So I think Wilks is on the hot seat. Whether this move was made or not, I think to your point, now he's on the hot seat even further, because it's like, all right, dude, you probably sat in a meeting and were like, hey, my guys aren't getting home. I'm not getting to the quarterback. Like, and that's leaving my defensive backfield out to dry. Okay.
They said, all right, I bet.
Yeah. You know what I mean? All right, cool. Why didn't you say that 3 weeks ago? You know what I mean? Like, let's roll.
Yeah. You know what's crazy? You know what's crazy is that Chase Young now leads the 49ers in sacks.
49K player of the week right there.
Yeah. We were joking about that right before we went live. Like, you know what? So yeah, he has 6 sacks on the season. It's very sad. It's very sad when you look at all the guys that they have on this defensive line. And so in that sense, like I do feel that he should be able to help the situation, right? I mean, he has totally 6 sacks of his own with the Commanders. Now joining this group of guys, on paper, it looks great. I mean, but so did the defensive line going into the season, right? So yeah, there has to be other changes to make on Steve Wilks' part, aside from just bringing Chase Young in here and hoping that he's going to fix all of your problems, because I think we know it goes well beyond just any one single player. Sure, Nick Bosa is underperforming, but we are seeing everyone else on this defensive line underperforming. That is a coaching issue. That is a defensive scheming issue. You know what I mean? So I think, there's a lot of adjustments to be made that go well beyond just a single player. And hopefully we see that. And when those things start clicking, though, with these group of guys, it should make everything else look good. But it's up to Steve Wilks to figure it out what the issue is, right? I kind of tend to think that it's a trickle-down effect, right? It's a domino of things, and it probably all starts with one thing. And probably what you mentioned, Weston, and what a lot of people have been mentioning too, that the defensive line is disconnected from the coverage right now. And as soon as they sort of figure that out, if he can, then things should look a lot better after that. But I think right now it's still a big if. Like, I don't even know how confident I feel about that, right? Yeah. But a bye week should be big. That's a lot of time to figure out and make adjustments.
They got no choice. Otherwise, might as well hang it up, This defense is not stopping anybody right now. Like, there's just open season for the run game. And you mentioned the disconnect between the coverage and the pass rush. Like, that's just, these are NFL quarterbacks. And if you look at the schedule, some pretty good ones coming to town and that we're going to visit over the next few weeks, they'll eat it alive. Yep. I think I one final thought on the Chase Young thing is I feel like it's the final validation around like the decision that they will or maybe will not make on Steve Wilks. Like, for all intents and purposes, like, hey, we gave you you're taking over probably the best defense you've ever had as on the coaching on the defensive side of the ball. Yeah, we lost some contributors, but we also brought in Javon Hargrave to a big money contract. And now we're going to bring in Chase Young, the pair opposite Nick Bosa. Still got some, young players to develop, and Kasarik needs to get a little bit more out of Farrell and some of these other guys. But like, it just feels very much like along the defense, like the left hand's not talking to the right. And it always felt like that was the most cohesive group that we put out there. And now it doesn't feel that way at all.
Yeah. And the Shaw Show, what's up, Shaw? He asked, do you guys think we should give Johnny Holland a chance to call plays? It was brought up to me earlier and I hadn't realized this, but when Steve Wilks was defensive coordinator, well, I don't even remember if he, yeah, well, when he was with Carolina, he wasn't calling defensive plays.
No.
Um, and so maybe that's kind of the issue. I don't know. But clearly, like, I don't know if there's an obvious choice for a guy who can take over defensive play calling duties on this team. Otherwise, if they had a guy, that guy would probably be the defensive coordinator right now. That being said, Johnny Holland, coach of the linebackers, and this team or this defense has experience, with the linebackers coach, being thrust into defensive coordinator, right, with Saleh and then D'Amico Ryans. So if they wanted to keep things more or less the same to how they're used to running things, as far as the defensive line being like, the point of focus and having everything work off of that. I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting proposition, but yeah, maybe it's just a trust thing. I don't know if the 49ers really know that anyone can handle that right now.
I just don't think there's like a superstar laying in the, in the shadows like there was D'Amico behind, Saleh, and they've always felt confident in D'Amico, right? And I think Saleh kind of took him under his wing. I don't know if Wilks is doing that with anybody. Here's the reality. They're not going to make a change to if the change comes, it's going to be because Steve Wilks is exited from 4949 Centennial Boulevard in Santa Clara. Like that's just the way it's going to go. He's professional enough. He's been around this long enough. He should at very least have the respect of his players and treat them with like an open door policy where if they have rumblings, just go to him. You know what I mean? Like Fred Warner, this is why you wear a C on your jersey. Nick Both, this is why you wear C's. You go and be like, guy, we got to get back to what we were doing. We were doing it so well. And if Wilks can't make the adjustment, this is a career professional. You know what I mean? Like a seasoned vet at his craft and his trade, then he's got to walk. Like it's just that simple. Then he's got to be walked out. And honestly, I mean, we've seen Kyle walk away from more. You know what I mean? Like if we think of the whole Trey Lance saga and everything, like he'll cut bait real fast if it doesn't look clean after this, the bye week.
I mean, there's a lot at stake. There's a lot at stake for the 49ers.
Yeah, there
and
is.
I will say this, and Melissa brings up this point as well. Why is Steve Wilks getting all of the blame when, for a variety of reasons? Like, I actually think that this past game against the Bengals, there was a certain point in the game where I felt like, the defense is actually kind of tightening up here. Like they're actually giving the offense some chances. All right, we can actually do this. That bend not break, right? Or bend don't break. And that's when the interception started, the turnover started to happen. That's backbreaking, right?
Sure.
But I didn't forget. I'm not going to ignore the fact that the defense did put them in a spot more than once to tie the game up, and it could have been a different game. So, I kind of do agree. Like, there is a lot of blame going to Steve Wilks, and part of it is because you have all these superstars. We're so used to having the defense look a certain way, and so we're just not used to that. So for us, it's just like, come on, man, like what are you doing, kind of thing. But I mean, clearly to me, the offense also needs some adjustments in this bye week. I think, sure, injuries are part of that. Like Trent Williams is a huge reason that the offensive line and the run blocking hasn't been great these past couple of weeks. Sure. Deebo Samuel not being out there, the threat of him in itself, part of the reason as well. But I was a little disappointed that I didn't see enough adjustments, to counter what defenses were doing because they weren't respecting the motion these past 2 weeks. No. So like I wouldn't see any adjustments. So Kyle, you're gonna have Deebo back probably after the bye week. You're probably gonna have Trent Williams back. And so maybe he won't even have to counter. I don't know, but I would like to see some adjustments, Kyle, as well on the offense. 3 straight games now they've scored 17 points. After starting the season like they did, scoring 30 points consecutive games, right? that is on you. So, yeah, I'm looking at Kyle a little bit here too during this bye week.
Yeah, I think Melissa's really accurate with her comment too about like why is it like just Wilks and it feels like we're pouring on them. Here's the truth: you can line up all the players and all the coaches in a line, and you could take a shot at any one of them, and you'd be right, right? Like it's just not going well, no matter how you cut it. Defense isn't playing well, offense is playing equally as poor, and there's this common term that we keep throwing around: adjustment, 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 and it's just lacking. I've seen plenty of adjustments all made by the opposing team, right? Who's adjusting to our scheme and our style. And here's the truth: the offensive line, here's what's really missing from the offense: the run game, right? Everything we do is predicated off the run game, and it's not there. And again, it's not like Christian McCaffrey forgot overnight how to find a hole and exploit it. It's just not there. Like, this is why the knowledgeable fans were screaming during the offseason the most important positions are up and down the offensive line, because Trent Williams is good every year to miss at least 2 games. Every single year. Like, write it in like clockwork. He's going to miss at least 2 games for you. And what are we supposed to just like not block anybody for 2 games and not like try to win football games? I don't understand that. This offensive line is just poor. Like, you can't justify it. Like, they just get pushed into the backfield darn near every single snap, and people want to sit there, myself included, like, why are we abandoning the run? Why are we abandoning the run?
Right.
And then this is going to go to what we talk about, I'm sure, in a little bit, how because we're abandoning the run, we're putting our quarterback, I won't even name him because I know he's getting trashed, we're putting the quarterback in inopportune spots.
Yeah.
It's just, we're asking him to do things that we've never have. And we would probably all agree, even while we were all singing his praises, maybe he's just not fully capable yet. He just doesn't have that level of experience in the NFL. And then we're sitting there wondering, like, why the hell you lost 3 games in a row? Like, it is just turn on the tape. It's blatantly obvious, like, why we lost those games. If I can see it and you can see it, I just need the coaching staff to see it and make some adjustments. I don't understand. I don't.
Yeah. I mean, they have to see it too, right? It's just like, maybe because there's so many little things kind of going on, maybe they needed this bye week and they're kind of waiting for the bye week to make all these adjustments. I mean, it just feels like on both sides of the ball, it's not complimentary football. Like, we talk about, like, on the defensive side, everything is kind of falling on the secondary right now, and the secondary is not built to shoulder the load of opponents and quarterbacks and them being targeted so many times. That's where the pass rush comes in. But if the pass rush isn't working, well, guess what? Your secondary is going to get exposed. So on the other side, on offense, we're kind of seeing, well, you're not able to run the football. Okay, Brock Purdy, who's been great in like very complimentary spots, up early, everything's working, the run is working, offensive line's blocking, then he can look good. But I think we're also seeing that when Brock Purdy, like you were saying, he's putting these spots he hasn't been in before in the NFL, and he probably feels a sense of he has to save the day a little bit. He has to be the hero, and he's, based on what we've seen so far, not that it's like, a final judgment on Brock Purdy, but from what we know so far, maybe that's not his game, right? Like, maybe that's not what he's best at. So, on the offensive side of the ball, it's also not complimentary. So it's all discombobulated on both sides. And I think once they can get either one of those things to start clicking again, they can look like the same team, who was dominating other teams in the first 5 weeks of the season. That being said, I don't think they'll ever really be dominating like we saw in those first few weeks, because if you go back and you look at the opponents, it makes a lot of sense why they were, stomping a lot of those teams. Now, the second half of your season, the schedule, very tough. And you mentioned all the quarterbacks that they're going to be facing here real soon, and it's not pretty. So there is kind of a deadline here to get all of this stuff adjusted and situated. And, hopefully they could, because, if you can't, you've put the tape out there of okay, if we're doing this, this is how you're going to beat us.
Yeah.
And so they need a counter. So hopefully we get that in the bye week. It's very important, of course, to the 49ers hopes and dreams of being a Super Bowl team. And yeah, despite all this, it is still in grasp. It's still early in the season, right? But changes do have to be made. So yeah, hopefully we see that after the bye week.
Yeah, we better, I mean, listen, they've notoriously over the last few years have come out strong out of the bye week, right? I think this year's a little bit different because the opponent that we face coming out of the bye week is also coming off of their bye week. So there's not necessarily a competitive edge, in terms of like just having longer preparation than your opponent, etc. for the game. They just actually, can I ask you? I'm going to ask you your own question, Steph. You posed this on Twitter.
Okay.
In one word, describe the San Francisco 49ers of the 2023 season.
What's funny about that, before I give my answer here, I got, as you can imagine, I got a lot of the same, words. One that was like, okay, like, that's interesting that I got so many times was like schizophrenic. I was like, okay, okay, sure.
Sure.
Sure. I was just surprised that one came up so many times.
Yeah.
But I would just say discombobulated. I like that word. But also like I think it's reflective of what I'm seeing here. I mean, we're talking about the defense, for example, and how it's the pass rush is disconnected from the coverage right now, and that's hurting them all around. On the offense, it's kind of the same thing, but it's the run game, and the offensive blocking, things like that. So I would just say discombobulated, or, you can use the word disconnected if you like that word a little bit better, but it all kind of sort of means the same thing. And so I think that's fixable, right? Like, at least it's something that's fixable.
So let me ask you this, Steph, because I've been having this conversation a lot lately. Obviously, it's more related to, no matter what word you're seeing, it's all more like recency bias. A lot of it related to like the last 3 games, right? And the result related to those 3 games. But the net is they're 5-3 after 8 weeks of football heading into their bye week. If they were going into their bye week at 5-3 with a different combination of wins and losses versus winning 5 straight, losing 3 straight, would that change your outlook? Right? Like,
probably.
Yeah.
I mean, a little. Yeah, probably.
Because if you looked at it, right, I looked at the schedule to open up the year. First of all, 5-3 is the best they've been through 8 weeks since 2019, right?
Oh,
like, that's the truth. Yeah, that's good.
Feel better.
But when you like opened up the schedule, right, like, and you look at everything up to the bye week, you probably immediately were like, Pittsburgh on the road week 1, and we still don't know about Brock's health. That's going to be a tough game, right?
Yeah.
You probably were like, oof, Dallas, like, yes, we tend to beat them, but they're still a really good football team, and this is not the playoffs, right? They're a regular season team. You probably looked at Cleveland and were like, we don't match up well. And oh, by the way, you were expecting Nick Chubb and Deshaun Watson to be playing in that game. And then Cincinnati, who's represented the AFC in the AFC Championship 2 consecutive years, you're like, that game's probably going to be rough. So you found in the first 8 games, potentially 3 to 4 losses to begin with, or 3 to 4 tight games. And yet, like, here we are, you know what I mean? Like, it's just a different result that's making it feel different, or like how we got there. Because it was all this promise, and now it's just dumpster fire, right? Like, promise the dumpster fire so fast. This bye week is really going to be an indicate. The first 2 weeks out of this bye week, it's going to be the true indication as to like what this team is. Or do you fold it? Because they're still going to get into the playoffs, right? They're still going to find a way into the playoffs, but like, that's not what we want. Like, make noise. So what are they gonna? Exactly. Are they going to be competitive, or are they going to limp in? With like 9 wins, 10 wins. That sort of thing.
Exactly. So like, I think for us, that's what it all comes down to, right? Because, as fans, we've seen this team get close so many times. So this limping in thing, we've seen it before. It doesn't always end so well, right? So, we're hoping for a different outcome. The strong start kind of gave us the sense that, okay, well, the team seems to be tired of limping in too, and they're controlling their fate, and they're starting off strong. This is great, and then to see it kind of like fall apart right before our eyes, I think is what's given us the uneasy feeling, because they're in this rut that through 3 games seems they can't get out of.
Yeah.
That's the concern, is that it looks like there haven't been any adjustments in these last 3 weeks to change any of what we're seeing.
And yet they still had moments in all 3 games where they could have completely changed the complexion of the game, right? So it's like execution.
Yeah.
Will you
Yeah.
entertain me
Yep.
for 12 seconds and then we go wherever you want to go with this show? So the
Let's go.
5-0 start, not only did I feel like it set like false expectations of what this team was going to achieve in the regular season of this year, I also think it set false expectations around Brock Purdy. Now, I want to clarify. I am not coming off the Brock Purdy train. And Steph, I'm documenting on your show, my show, everything about I was a Trey over Brock guy anyway. And it took me a little while to get to this side. But the dude is playing really good. 75% of the time. He is 75% of the game. He's playing really
I'd say even
good.
80. Like, yeah, I'd say even more than that.
It's playing really good football, more competent football than we've seen any of our quarterbacks play, I don't know, since like 2014, maybe, right? 2013, 2014. So there's a lot, like some of these throws, like one of those throws that he made to Kittle. I mean, it was the prettiest throw I've seen Brock make in his professional career. It was beautiful. And then, of course, he followed that up with what should have been an interception. It was an interception, like literally on the next pass. And I'm like, oh, dude, I was just like in my head singing your praises. But, you hear people like, I don't follow a lot of like the big million follower, like talking heads out there, but there's 2 that I actually have a ton of respect for. One's Kurt Warner, one's Tony Romo, right? These guys, who knows how to value at the quarterback position than maybe these 2 guys. And they do nothing but sing his praises. And they start to validate what I see. We talked about he's doing things that he's not expected to do anymore. He's in situations where it's like, oh, you got to go win the game. We've never even asked you to do that yet. Right. So it's like there's a first time for everything. And usually the first time you do something, it doesn't go well. Like that Elijah Mitchell play where they missed the handoff and he goes and throws the play, trying to make a play. He's probably trying to even get that ball out of bounds, right? Like, and just get it over the linebacker's head. Defensive player makes a good play. Guess what? You'll never see him make that mistake again. And I actually believe that. So it feels really bad, but it's like, hey, if you're going to make these mistakes, this is probably the time during the season to do it where we can still recover it. But you can't actually put on his tape and say he's not playing good football. It's just not all connected yet. But he's 23 years old, still technically in a rookie season. Like, do we really think Trey Lance was going to come and take us to a high? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. So I'm like, he's not absolved of blame because he's making bonehead mistakes at bonehead moments, but the overall body of work is still really, really promising from Brock. So
yeah, I think so too. No, like my thoughts on Brock Purdy hasn't changed in terms of like all the good things that he does well. Because he's still doing all those really good things. The only thing that still could use some improvement, because like I said, he's still a really young quarterback and he still hasn't played a full, season. So I think it's just the fact that when he's playing from behind, we haven't seen what we have seen so far is not good. Right. And so that was a question a lot of people still had about Brock. And, now we're seeing that and it's not great. Right. But that's not written in permanent marker or anything. Like he can still rewrite that part of himself. So I'm not ready to say like that's who Brock is, and he'll never be a guy who can, take them back and win a game for them at the end there. But so far it hasn't happened. He can improve on it. I'm sure like some of the things we're talking about, if the run game after the bye week can improve, Trent Williams get back in there, Deebo Samuel gets back in there, and the offense as a whole looks like itself again, I'm sure it'd be a hell of a lot better for Brock too. So yeah, I'm not ready to make any like sweeping, statements against Brock Purdy right
No.
now. I don't think we're at this point.
And even while he's making mistakes, Steph, is it really Brock? Or I'm just gonna state the obvious here and then we can move on, whatever. But at least in the Kyle Shanahan era, and I'd argue even before, when was the last time that you felt the San Francisco 49ers were actually built to play from behind? They've always been I just feel like they've always been a front running team, right? They want to get out on you fast, early, control the line of scrimmage. And this goes back to Harbaugh, right? When they were a dominant run team. I just can't remember a time. I mean, the last time that I can, and I could be wrong, but like that comes right to the tip of my brain, was that New Orleans Saints game in 2019 when they went up 2 scores on us pretty early in the game. And like we battled back and kept it close. But like, when do they really play from behind?
I mean, that's fair. Like I think
most teams aren't good from behind. That's the truth.
That's true. Obviously their forte and the position they would want to put themselves in is, getting that early lead. Yes, every team it would say the same. But I think with Brock, they have hell of a bigger potential to turn that around than in years past, right? So that's why I still feel optimistic about it. I'm not too worried about that. So they'll improve here. I think the offense will definitely improve in the next few weeks. My question still is on the defense. So we'll see how that looks after the bye week. But Weston, we didn't talk too much about the game, and that was kind of my choice, right? Like, I was like, you know what? We have a trade to talk about, and, this is a great excuse to not have to talk about something sad, like the 49ers losing their third game in a row. But what we're going to do here is what we always do every Monday or Tuesday, if, I'm not around Monday, is the 49ers Player of the Week, voting. And as a joke, I almost said, let's just make Chase Young the 49K Player of the Week. But
I support.
But there were a couple guys who did play a good game on Sunday. And so let's just give them their flowers here. All right. And I'll start first. All right. And I'll start with Brandon Ayuk. All right. Because Brandon Ayuk, again, Deebo Samuel's not out there. It was a game after he didn't get targeted in the second half, right? The previous game. This time he had 5 catches, 109 yards. And so that was on 9 targets. So good bounce back game from Brandon Ayuk. I don't know if it's just me, Weston, but I still want to see like a little bit more from Brandon Ayuk. He did have that ball that hit him like in his face mask. I would have loved if he caught that. There's still like these very small things. Like if he cleaned up, we'd be talking about him like we talk about the top 5 receivers in the league right now. And I know that's where he wants to be. So little things to clean up. But this is me giving him his flowers. He had a great game on Sunday.
Yeah, he's been highly productive the past 2 weeks. What I think, and I agree with you, right? There's a few things that he could clean up along the way that would definitively have his name up there mentioned with the top 5 to 7, wide receivers in the league. What's perplexing to me is he just seems to like disappear in the second half. And I know that's probably more play calling and probably even defensive playing calling when we talk about adjustments, right? Like where, Brock's been comfortable going with the ball with Deebo out. That's going to be the primary target, etc. But Ayuk's a difference maker. A lot of these plays have been big pass plays down the field. I'd like to see them get him the ball a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage and like bring him back a little bit of that yak that he's known for. But I'm loving the routes, the dagger routes, the arrow routes, the drags, like they're getting it to him on the move. They are getting him to him a little bit spaced downfield. And every time Brock releases that ball to him, I feel like he's wide open. Like, where is the defense, But I'd still like to see a little bit more of that. Like, I don't, a little bit of a quick bubble or like a 5-yard drag or 5-yard out, let him turn off field and see what he can do. But like, I'm still just, the drop is another like part of the disappearing act in the second half, right? Like that's big spot. Could have been a big, chunk play. I mean, dude, it hit you in your face mask. I know you were falling forward, but like, this is contract year, baby. Like, go get that bag. Got to pick that up to get that bag.
All right. Well, who do you got?
Well, we don't have the same two because I had two different.
Oh,
Like Ayuk
all
was not
right.
on the name, so spoiler alert: there's nobody from the defensive side of the ball getting any flowers from
Yeah.
me in this particular game. I'm gonna go back to. I'm going to use George Kittle in this scenario. I said it going into this game. Obviously, we all remember he had a big monster game against the Bengals last week. In 2021. Big game. Felt it was going to, needed to be the same. Felt he needs to be involved in the offense all year, especially with, Debo out. Like, this guy's a playmaker. He's a beast with the ball in his hands. Made some big catches in the first half. Total of 9 for 149. I say that with a little caveat because I know he had like 3 catches on like a meaningless drive, like towards the end of the game, like literally 3 catches in a row. But even if I subtract that, you're still 6 for over 100 in big points in the game. And an overlooked stat is he actually had a tackle in this game as well. So look at Big 85 playing
Hey,
defense as well.
let's go.
But this is what's the battle that we always have? It's Kelsey. No, it's Kittle. Who's the best tight end in the league? Well, Kittle blocks, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? Like, he's not really involved just not nearly involved in the offense as he should be, especially if you're airing this thing out and you can't get the run game going. Like, every quarterback safety net is a viable tight end option. And George Kittle is very much a viable tight end option.
Yeah, that was one of mine as well. I mean, he's had a couple strong showings here now with Debo Samuel out and them, being in these from behind situations where, they have to throw the football a little bit more. They've played some defenses that play single high. He pretty much eats in those scenarios more often than not. So yeah, he's had some great games. Melissa's saying Juwan Jennings. I'm like looking at
There's no
stats
stat
here. I'm
There's
like,
no
did
stat.
he even have a catch? I love Juwan Jennings, but I'm sure he was blocking his butt off. But
Is
I don't
Melissa
know if
like
that's worthy of 49K player of the week.
is she like my spirit animal, right? I always find that one every
Dark
week,
horse.
Steph, that like you're like, well, you weren't watching him block all game. You know what I mean? He's Juwan's a dog, and Juwan is a dog. I love Juwan Jennings.
He's a dog. So honorable mention, Melissa. There you go.
Yeah, we'll put him. No CMC
right.
from you?
No, man. In
How,
fact,
though?
who
118
knows?
yards?
Okay.
2 touchdowns?
If you just look at the scrimmage, from scrimmage, 64 yards receiving and touchdown. Yeah, that is nice. 2 touchdowns, yeah. And
I get what you're
he
saying,
tied
though,
the
right?
record.
Yeah.
So why
17.
isn't he your next one?
He is my next one. That's why I was asking you. You didn't have
There you
CMC. Yeah, just
I just have 2, and it was Kittle and Ayuk.
You know what the funny thing is in these losses, his touches have gone down. So I'm like, oh, are we conserving him a little bit? Like, is that why we're listen, it's game flow, it's the way the offense is going. And I know he's on the struggle bus hard because he's just doing everything he can to find a seam and get to a gap and split it. But at the end of the day, Steph, again, still over 100 yards total offense, 2 touchdowns. I mean, like, what team in the NFL wouldn't sign up to have that guy on their offense any day of the week,
I mean, I would. I know I would. All right, so we got our 3 then. We have George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, and Christian McCaffrey on the docket for 49K player of the week for week 8. Again, I just want to remind people, I understand that the team lost, but we always are trying to look for some silver linings, for a bright spot. So we have Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, and McCaffrey who provided that on Sunday. So now, if you would be so kind and want to have some fun with us here, let us know who you would like to vote for in the comments. And in the meantime, me and Weston, and Weston is rolling up his sleeves as we speak because we're getting ready to put some guys on notice. Who you have, Weston?
I'm sweating over this. I got to put Isaiah Oliver on notice. I don't know what else to do,
Yeah.
I mean, you were targeted a whole bunch in this game. Listen, I'll let him sip. I'll give him 1 flower out of a bouquet. When he's close to the line of scrimmage, he's actually pretty effective.
He's a good run defender.
Yeah, but we don't need that from our nickel defender in the slot in this defense the way it's built. I need you to be Jimmy Ward. I need you to be Why am I? I'm just so tired from 24. Why am I drawing a blank? Best slot corner
Jordan
in football.
Mason?
No. It was 24. Williams.
Oh,
K1. Jesus. I'm
A1.
so sorry about that.
Man, that was a while ago, though.
I know, but
I thought you were going to say Jimmy Ward.
That's the mold that we actually need, right? Is more of that, and we don't. And I'm not seeing that. He feels like he's there, but he's a second late. He's a step slow, and he's just getting cooked. And that's, you saw it. Where was Jamar Chase all game? In the slot. You know what I mean? Like, just put your best receiver there, and you're going to eat.
Right?
Yeah, it's no brainer.
Yeah, he was. So I saw this tweet from Kevin Kruger. He said Isaiah Oliver has allowed an 100% completion percentage when targeted in 4 consecutive games. 8 of 8 quarterbacks are when targeting his coverage. 71 yards, 2 touchdowns against the Bengals. And yeah, on the season, he's allowing a completion percentage of 87.5% in his coverage. That's second worst in the NFL among cornerbacks who have a minimum of 25 targets. So
this is his guy.
Not great phrase. I know, right?
You brought
so like
this guy
to add insult to like everything else that he has shown, to this point, right? Like Steve Wilks, the guy you handpicked, is probably like the weakest link on your defense. That's not great, right?
It's just frustrating. I'm just watching our D-backs chase across the field is just frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And so unfortunate, but yeah, that's a good guy to put on notice for sure. Once again, I think I want to put like the coaches on notice. At this point, I'm just seeing a lot of lapses in just uncharacteristic play from a lot of guys. And, Melissa here wants to put Fred Warner and Mooney Ward on notice. When would you hear us ever putting these guys on notice? Like these are guys who are veterans, who should know better, who should always be having good games, even in the bad days. So it's just so odd and so uncharacteristic to see these guys having some of the games that they are. And I think that comes from coaching. Yeah. I think it comes from coaching. Like there's no other explanation to me about it. I think you're seeing a lack of motivation for some guys, a lack of effort sometimes from some guys, and I'm not liking it. And I think on both sides of the ball, you can see some of that. So for who I want to put on notice, it's the coaching staff, man, offensive and defensive, because it isn't just Steve Wilks. All right. I want to see some improvements on offense as well. And so both of those guys are on notice for me.
It's like we keep going back to this with coaching. When you're hesitant and you're not playing, 1,000 miles an hour, you're a day late and $1 short to every play, to everything. Like Melissa's not wrong about putting Fred Warner on blast a little bit. I know nobody wants to talk about all pro Fred. You know who had a worse cover day than Isaiah Oliver on Sunday? Fred Warner. 9 targets, 9 receptions, right? One better in every column over Oliver. And that's not Fred Warner-esque. They're just out of position. They are out of sync. And Steph, I could not possibly agree with you more in the sense of like, that's a coaching issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Technically, she says, question for specific reasons, but do you think distractions can affect some of these folks like Fred too? I saw some of the people in the comments, mentioning like, Fred Warner has been doing a podcast this season. So is Eric Armstead. I know even Draymond Green got a lot of flack for, when he started his podcast and, his play took a dip. I don't know if that has anything to do with the podcast, right? But anytime it does and people see that you have a podcast, I think people are going to, point to that because it's like, well, are they distracted, right?
They're professional athletes. They're distracted every time they walk out of their house or their apartment. Like they're it's all there for them.
They do have lives too.
Yeah. Like Steph, I have a normal 9 to 5, right? And I do this thing pretty often. I don't feel like I'm too distracted, but I get it. Right. Like because we invest so much as fans, mentally, financially, all those things. Steph, you just went to the game, right? You just flew back home. to go to this game, to turn around and come back. That wasn't free. That cost you money to do that. You're putting all this in. You're like, I just want you to focus on nothing but ball for 7 months. Can you do that?
Please.
Like, is that too much to ask? You know, and they're not wrong. Like, yes, of course they're distracted. They're human beings. We're all distracted, you know, but like you also have to say, like, you're a professional. You want to go mess around on your little podcast and make TikTok videos. Just be here when we're working out and we're practicing.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess Fred and his wife just announced they're having a baby. Congratulations to them.
To them.
I mean, that in itself could be a distraction. But like Weston said, that's life. I mean, all these guys live a life outside of football. I think we also do have to remember that. But I thought this comment was interesting. Feels like they're not playing for Wilks.
I believe that.
I kind of get that sense too. But again, it's not just the defense. Like I'm seeing some weird things on offense too. But yeah.
Here's something that was always said to me in playing days, and not to be like Al Bundy and live my glory days at Polk High here, but we had a coach that was very much like, I know you guys don't like me, but like, don't play for me. Play for your own brand. Like, you're a professional, right? Like, every day that you step out on this field, it's still an audition. Like, so I can't use the not playing for Steve Wilks as an excuse. I believe there's discombobulation, to utilize your words, right? And disorganization, etc. But like, at the end of the day, you're a professional. If Steve Wilks is the reason that you're not willing to be motivated and play, well, then there's a bigger issue with you, the individual, than there actually is with Steve Wilks. Like, you shouldn't, like, we're all adults. You're a professional. You get paid a lot of money with a lot of eyes. You shouldn't need to be like brought up. Like, at the end of the day, like I say this in my own line of work, like, yes, I represent my company, but more importantly, like, I represent my brand as well. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not going to let a leader, a manager, or president ever take that ability away from me.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Sometimes it is easier said than done.
Of course.
But, especially when you think about, you're doing a group project together, basically, every single week. Those aren't always fun, especially when someone screws the pooch and it's not a great presentation, but yeah, something has to improve there.
Group
Weston,
project. That's such a great analogy.
Right. I mean, it is.
So
it is a
good.
group project. Team
So
sport. Weston, do you have a vote for 49K Player of the Week this week?
I do. Brandon Ayuk.
Wow. Okay. What's funny is I'm about to vote for Christian McCaffrey.
I know.
He wasn't even.
I didn't have Ayuk written down on my paper either.
Because I think you convinced me. Like, we convinced each other.
That's what we're here for,
like,
Steph.
our own nomination. So I'm gonna go with CMC. But looking at the comments here, Kittle is actually our 49K Player of the Week based on all the votes here. So everyone got love today. We do appreciate that. And yeah, appreciate you guys voting. Usually we do these shows on Monday, so make sure you guys tune. I guess next week, because it's bye week, we won't be doing this one. But make sure you guys tune in after the Monday after the Jaguars game, and we'll be back at it. But for now, have a good rest of your Tuesday, folks, and don't eat too much chocolate. Don't get the cavities, all right? But from me and Weston, have a good one. Peace.